Well, hello, and welcome to this Wildlife Trust webinar on nature and wellbeing whilst working at home. I'm Peter Dorrans from the Wildlife Trusts, and I'm joined by my colleagues Dominic Higgins and Leanne Manchester. And together we're going to take you through this webinar, which will look at why nature is important to wellbeing. It will also look at how you can use nature to support your wellbeing, and we're going to look at that in a general sense, as well as in the very specific circumstances we find ourselves in with the COVID-19 pandemic. And then Leanne is going to take us through some very specific activities and actions that you can take as an individual or a family whilst you're confined at home. And we've included within that some activity ideas for those of you that are homeschooling. Across the 46 wildlife trusts in the UK, we work with 2,500 businesses. And one of our objectives in those relationships is to inspire and enable the employees of those businesses to connect with wildlife, connect with nature every day. In usual times, one of the ways we would do this would be to take you out onto one of our 2,300 nature reserves and let you get busy with some real conservation activities which would have a benefit to your local communities. And we know that you would go home feeling happier and healthier at the end of the day. Now, of course, these aren't usual times. And the reason we're doing this webinar is because we understand that the employees of our corporate partners are facing a great deal of worry and a great deal of uncertainty. And we really want to help you to use nature to help you get through that. So as we go through the webinar, we hope that you pick up some useful hints and tips, and you're inspired to notice the nature that's around you every day and to get outside when you can in the natural environment. So I'm now going to hand over to Dom, who is our health and education manager. And Dom is going to take us through some of the context about why nature is important to our well-being, and some more general hints on how you can use the natural world to look after your well-being during this time. Dom, over to you.
Thank you very much, Pete. So the first thing to say is that nature is important to our well-being at the Wildlife Trusts, and it's firmly embedded in our beliefs. So there's two of them on the slide in front of you. And we believe that people are a part of nature. And so as well as the intrinsic value that nature has and all of the services that it provides, we also believe that it is of such value to people that it's really important that we have that daily contact. And not only will daily contact with nature improve our well-being, it'll also bring happiness. And that's really important as we start to think about some of the impacts that nature can have on our health and well-being. If we move on to some of the reasons why, then the natural world and our relationship with it are both in trouble. So if we look at the abundance and the quality and the distribution of wildlife and wild places, that's reducing rapidly, and therefore our personal connection to nature is also declining because it becomes a less frequent and a less significant part of our daily lives. If we just look recently, back in 2019, the public mood changes, so movements like Extinction Rebellion and the youth climate strikes, they demonstrate the need for change and the appetite for change for the health of people, the health of wildlife, and the health of the planet ultimately. And wider than these movements, polling in June 2019 shows that 7 in 10 British people, they want urgent political action to combat climate change and protect the natural environment. So the need for wildlife and wild places in people's lives is increasing. It helps us stay well, and it helps us to recover from illness, particularly as you see from the next slide when it comes to mental health and illnesses associated with obesity and loneliness. 1 in 3 of us will be obese this year, and heart and circulatory problems remain the biggest killer in the UK. So physical inactivity is a huge burden on our system. Mental health is another very significant public health concern, and is one of the main causes of the overall disease burden worldwide, if you look at some of the information from the Mental Health Foundation. Mental health can cost 105 billion a year and affects sort of 15 million people. Loneliness experienced by 9 million people across the UK, and that was before COVID-19. In our current circumstances, recent polling, so today is the 24th of April, but if we look at recent polling just this week, 1 in 4 people who answer the poll are actually experiencing loneliness. So the problem's increasing. We need a natural health service that runs in every community in the UK. And that would run alongside our traditional NHS. And you can find that the evidence is such that we will help save the system money if we plug people into nature a lot earlier on. So we help people help people to prevent health problems. There's a really interesting bit of research, if we look at the next slide, from Dr. Becca Lovell from the University of Exeter, and it looks at some of the nested impacts, if you like, of conservation activities when we are being active in nature. So the first circle is the direct benefits, the therapeutic side, the things that we feel personally. Spending time in the natural environment as a resident or a visitor improves mental health and feelings of well-being. Specifically, it reduces stress, fatigue, and anxiety and depression. It can also boost the immune system, and it also encourages physical activity. Children within easy reach of nature do 20 minutes more physical activity than those that don't. And so at that individual level, it's really important. Widen that out slightly, and we're talking about the quality of life, what we're feeling at a neighborhood level, and our feelings of well-being. And if we connect people strategically further up the health system, we can prevent a lot of problems by ensuring that people have access to nature. Finally, at an ecosystem service level, we see what nature does for us in terms of natural solutions. So if you just took one example where natural solutions to preventing floods or slowing the flow, that approach means that communities further down stream do not feel the impacts of flooding, and all the mental health impacts and the economic kind of damage that would do. And that's just one example of an ecosystem service. So that's just the nested impacts. We also have our own evidence. So we've been working with academics, and it shows basically that in as little as 6 weeks of regular volunteering, nature significantly improves the mental well-being of volunteers, especially those who have initially low mental well-being. So there's also a social return on investment calculated by Leeds Beckett Centre for Health Promotion. And what they found was Wildlife Trust's core volunteering programs, for every pound that you invest in those, you get a social return of £8.50. And that comes from all round health increases, improvements in well-being, and generally helping people to stay well as part of their lifestyles. We also have evidence that shows our targeted programs, which are designed specifically for those with a health or a social need. For every pound you invest in those, you get £6.88 return. Now, the low return is largely due to the higher running costs of such projects. But it just goes to show that independent, robust research is backing up a lot of what the wildlife trusts are doing. And so the solution of this, if we move to the next slide, is that we need to put nature into recovery. And this is what we're working to do across the wildlife trusts. With help from corporate partners such as yourselves, it helps us to influence decision makers so that communities across the UK will contribute to better physical, mental and social well-being because of the place they live, because they will be able to see wildlife from their windows or just step out into spaces right on the front door. The 1 in 4 of us that used to see our doctors because we were lonely will no longer do this. Instead, we'll connect with nature and the people around us every day. We're looking for legislation to ensure minimum standards of access to nature, so that those can be enforced by an independent body. And it will also be common practice for all health professionals to prescribe time and activity in biodiverse places. That's the vision that we have if we can recover nature and work on this together. So that's the sort of broad argument for why nature is good for our well-being. I'm going to conclude this part of the webinar by talking about 5 evidence-based ways that you can build into your lives that increases your well-being, particularly important at this time when we are working from home, schooling from home, socially isolated from people who we see very frequently, from the families, and they're very simple lessons that we can take on board. A lot of you may have come across these 5 ways to well-being because they're quite a good way of communicating how we can improve our well-being. But I think it's important before we dive into them that you understand that this is based in rigorous evidence. So back in 2008, a government foresight project on improving mental capital and how we can best look after our well-being going into the 21st century looked across the world at 80 or so studies, and they synthesized those studies and came up with 5 evidence-based ways that we can build into our lives that are proven to improve our well-being. And when we're talking about well-being, we're talking about how we feel, our happiness, our general feelings of positivity, but also how we function. And again, that's got real implications for us in these times of social distancing, where it may be harder for us to function. So the first of the ways to well-being is connect. And if we look at this is perhaps one of the most challenging times for us to socially connect with other people. Feeling close to and feeling valued by other people is something that we all need. It helps us to function well. Strong social relationships are a buffer against mental ill health, and it applies to people of all ages. Spending time around positive and supportive people means you are more likely to have a better self-image, and it increases your confidence, and particularly at this time, you will feel more able to face difficult situations. In return, if you are caring and supportive to other people, of course, you are much more likely to get a positive response from them. And here are some of the ideas that we've come up with at the Wildlife Trusts as to how you can better connect with people. And if you take a look at the slides, you'll see that our colleagues and friends in Ulster Wildlife Trust, they have a mass tea break every Wednesday where everybody gets together. I think the things that you can take away from these tips are have conversations, listen carefully, and respond in kind. Don't over rely on text messaging or emailing people. It's really important to make that sort of physical the physical connection in terms of the conversation. And if you can give yourself a minimum of 3 a day, then that's all to the better. There's lots of ideas out there of games that people can play, both traditional board games and virtual games, and doing quizzes, and you'll hear more about that from Leanne later on. So the second of the ways to well-being is take notice. If we really stop, take a breath or two, and take notice of what's going on around us, we become much more aware of our surroundings. We also become aware of other people and their feelings. If you do really stop, you focus in on what is taking place at that particular moment. And this is the thing that improves our well-being. The good news is that taking notice of the natural world has a particularly strong effect. So savouring the moment, in inverted commas, that's been shown to help us make positive decisions and choices. So the point here about this is to take some time to enjoy the natural environment around you. And here are some ideas. It's important when you are away from the office, and also when you're back in, that you green that area. Try and surround yourself with a different kind of environments. Taking notice is just referring back to the previous way to well-being. If you're having a conversation, something, and really listening to the answer, you become aware of your colleagues as well, and you start to sort of take them into consideration. Mindfulness works for a lot of people. Certainly that idea of taking your shoes and socks off, grounding yourself with nature, stopping and engaging all the senses, that's really important. There's a couple of links in this slide. One particular link is that Sounds of the Forest. That was part of an experiment done by RSPB and Woodland Trust, and that has been proven to reduce feelings of stress. So there's an 8-minute clip or so right there for you. Of course, with Wildlife Trust, you can sign up for 30 days wild. You can sign up at any time of year, and that's that sort of everyday kind of taking notice of nature every June, and making sure that you get a bit of a joy and a bit of fun out of your taking notice. I won't talk too much about the Wildlife Trust cams because Leanne's going to talk about the webcams later on. The key thing to avoid: take your time. Don't hurry when you are taking notice. It's important to slow down. So moving on, we look at the next way to well-being, and that's to give. Get involved in social and community life has been shown to improve well-being, and it's also a growing area of interest in research. It's been shown so far that people who have a genuine interest in helping others, and of course helping wildlife and nature and the local environment, those people are more likely to rate themselves as happy. Research into actions for promoting happiness has shown that committing an act of kindness once a week over a 6-week period is associated with increases in well-being. So here's a few ideas of things that you might do, those acts of kindness. And again, just remember, 1 a week for 6 weeks, that'll make you definitely feel happier. And I think if you can genuinely give and without that expectation of a return, then I think that's really important. Just a plug there. One way that you can give is taking action for insects. There's always a Wildlife Trust campaign that you can join in, and giving takes all kinds of different forms, from kind of signing a petition to writing to an MP to when social distancing is down, getting out and taking part in a volunteering group with your local Wildlife Trust. But you can do plenty at home in a window box or your garden and do wildlife friendly planting. All this helps to have that sense of well-being and that glow inside that you get from genuinely giving. Moving on, we're going to talk about the fifth way to well-being, and that is, the fourth way to well-being, and that is be active. Regular physical activity and raising the heart rate until you're out of breath is, of course, associated with better physical health. But it actually lowers rates of depression and anxiety, and that's across all age groups. Exercise is also essential for slowing age-related cognitive decline. So it's very important as we age, and if we're looking after older members of our family and friends. Exercise is also a really good way of promoting well-being. It doesn't need to be particularly intense for you to feel good. Slower paced activities such as walking, they're really effective too. And you find at the moment that they actually help you to connect with other people. Even with social distancing, more conversations tend to happen and more greetings and more little connections when you're out and about during social distancing times. One other thing to say is that research from University of Essex have shown that if you exercise in natural environments or with a view of nature, recovery times are quicker as well. So you get the added benefit of the mental well-being. you get from connecting with nature, and you get the physical benefit of that faster recovery time as well. There are some great ideas here. So there's a, for example, Staffordshire Wildlife Trust Big Weekend Wildlife Watch was a really great way to stealthily get active. And you know, if you've got friends and family or children that don't like sport, or don't like the lycra, or don't like the gym, there are really gentle ways and stealthy ways of becoming active. So going out and watching wildlife and taking note of those things, and that really plays into all senses of the other well-being, because actually being active gives you that purpose, gives you a decent way to connect to people, and also helps you to keep learning, which is the next of our 5 ways to well-being. Finally here, so the 5th one, continued learning throughout our lives, actually helps with self-esteem. It encourages to interact with other people and lead a more active life, so both physically and mentally. Evidence shows that work and activities that educate, broaden the mind, and stimulate learning new things particularly help to lift older people out of depression. So that's another important thing to remember. When we're working with our colleagues, remember that setting challenging but achievable goals, that's also associated with higher levels of well-being. So it gives you that sort of confidence, but it also gives you that feeling of self-esteem. Things to avoid, well, there's so much going on at the moment and so many suggestions coming from all directions that really you could put too much pressure on yourself. So I would just say, take one thing at a time. Don't cram too much in. You know, you could learn a new word for the week, and learn a new puzzle, or take up a new hobby. But take your time and don't put too much pressure on yourselves. So those are the 5 ways to well-being. I think it's probably worth going back over those slides in your own time, thinking what works for you, because we're all individuals. But if you apply each of those, that's going to help you to feel good and to function better. So I'll now hand over to Leanne, who can give you some specifics on what's on offer with the wildlife trusts.
Hi, thank you, Dom. So I'm going to take you through a few different ways now that you can connect with wildlife regardless of your circumstances. So it might be that you're unable to get outdoors at the moment at all. Perhaps you're socially isolating, or maybe you live in a flat in an urban area and you're finding it difficult to connect with wildlife. Well, we can help. We've got some incredible wild webcams on our website. We've got almost 30 webcams, some of which are due to go online now, but most of them are online already. You can watch nesting ospreys, you can watch busy badgers sorting out their nests, you can watch puffins in Alderney and lots more. So this is a really great way for you to connect with some of the incredible wildlife we've got in the UK, some that may be on your doorstep and others that might be further afield. The next slide, Pete. Okay, so for some of you, perhaps you've got a little bit more space, maybe you've got a garden. Connecting with wildlife and helping wildlife is a really great way to feel better about yourself. So this is a really great activity that you can do by yourself or with your family to help the pollinators in your garden. So if you have some wildflower seeds, or perhaps you have some plants, you can make your own nectar bar. This can suit whatever size garden you have. Perhaps actually you only have a balcony or a window box. That's no problem at all. You could make this into a much larger activity by converting a garden border. All you need is a few pollinator-friendly plants, some peat-free compost, and get planting. Now, it may be that actually you don't have any plants, and it might be that you can't get your hands on any compost at the moment. Don't worry at all. An alternative is just to leave a strip of your garden free from mowing. So don't mow the lawn in that area, let it grow wild, and have a look at the wildlife that comes to visit it. The bees will definitely thank you. As Pete mentioned at the start of this webinar, we know that there are quite a few people out there who are trying to homeschool at the moment. So we've created some resources that should help you to create fun, interesting lesson plans for your little ones. And these are activities that are suitable for you to do with them or for you to set them to do by themselves. This one is build a bird's nest. So it's really easy to do. All you need is either a garden or a local walk where you can collect things like grass, sticks, leaves, feathers, make sure that you wash your hands afterwards. Then you can set the challenge to your children to make their nest. Perhaps you could make it even harder by asking them just to use 2 fingers, so it's mimicking a bird's beak. Once they've completed their nest, you can have a look at it. Does it hold a few little mini eggs, or does it fall apart? Will it actually work as a bird's nest? Have a look on the internet. Google the different types of bird's nests out there, look at the different materials that they use and whether it's the same as the materials that you've used. At the end of this, you can give your nest back to wildlife by dismantling it and leaving it outside. You can even set up your post with the binoculars to see if any birds come and collect the materials. And I then wanted to show you a homeschooling activity for those of you who might not be able to get outdoors with your children. So this is a really easy activity. Most people should have the materials for these lying around the house. A lot of people don't know that we have basking sharks in the UK waters. They're incredible fish and really great subject for a lesson for your children. So before you make your basking shark, you could team this up with a bit of research. So set some questions, ask your kids to have a look at how long basking sharks live for, where you find them around the UK and what they eat. And then when they've discovered how incredible these creatures are, you can set them to work making their own bottle basking shark. And I just wanted to run through a couple of other activities that we've got that are brilliant for anybody of any ages. So at the moment, you might have seen that there's a lot more butterflies coming to your garden, and perhaps you don't know what butterflies they are. So we've got some great guides on our website, and this is one of them. A lot of the butterflies that you may see in the day are actually day-flying moths. So I've also included some illustrations here of some of the moths that you're likely to see. You don't even need a garden for this. You can have a look out of your window. Perhaps if you've made that nectar bar activity, you could set it up as a window box and see if any butterflies come and visit. And then if you can just snap any pictures of them, you can, when you come back into the house, you can compare them with your activity sheet and see if you recognise them. Okay, I'm coming to the end of this section now. I wanted to tell you a little bit about some brilliant YouTube videos we've been creating. So these are aimed at primarily families and children to help them with homeschooling. However, they're really brilliant, accessible activities for people of all ages to try. Every Wednesday, we'll be putting new videos online. This one is on planting vegetable seeds, but we have lots of other activities up there now and to be scheduled over the coming weeks. So do take a look. And finally, everything that I've just shown you and lots more can be found on our website. Here's 2 links. Please do go and have a look, peruse and try out some of the activities, and hope you enjoy.
Thank you very much, Leanne, and thank you very much, Dom. We hope that that's given you some inspiration and some ideas for how nature can help you to support your well-being during this time. To summarise what we've heard today, through our partnerships, employees are connecting with nature and they're supporting their communities. We've heard that there are 5 ways to well-being: connect, give, be active, learn, and take notice. And all of them can help you to support your well-being at any time, but especially during this extraordinary time. And finally, the Wildlife Trusts are here to help you to support your well-being during this time. What we've seen today is just a snapshot of the wealth of information and activities that are available, so please do visit our website. And finally, thank you for joining today. We would love to hear how you get on, so please do not hesitate to get in touch.